MLB Trade Rumors.com has released their annual arbitration projections. We're going to go through the list and tackle it from every angle. Also, Jon Morosi of MLB Network says the Mariners should set their sights on a superstar this offseason, but it's not Ohtani or Juan Soto. All that coming up here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. Colby, hit it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ahoy, sailors. It is Friday, October 6th, 2023. This is Ty Gonzalez and Colby Patnode for the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you so much for making us your first listen. Subscribe, like, and turn on alerts if you're watching on YouTube, or subscribe and leave a 5-star review on your preferred podcast platform if you like what you hear. And if you're part of the crew and rock with us every single day, let us know in the comments below. And if you want to hear from us even more, please consider signing up for our Patreon. You can now get a free 7-day trial to check out the show. The link, as well as our social accounts, is in the description of this episode. So today's show will be mostly about arbitration. MLB Trade Rumors.com has released their annual arbitration projections. We're going to go through the list, talking about what they have down for the Mariners ARB eligible players, and we'll also look around the league for some non-tender candidates, could be of interest to Seattle, and more. Later on in the show, we'll also talk about a superstar Jon Morosi thinks the Mariners should target this offseason. But first, Colby, for those that have no idea what the hell we're talking about with arbitration, can you give us a quick breakdown of what arbitration is and what some of these terms like tendering and non-tendering mean?
No, don't be lazy. Do your own research.
All right.
Moving on. No. So every winter, right, players are, well, some players are subject to what's called arbitration. And essentially, arbitration is simply the team and the player agree on a 1-year contract for a certain amount of money. It's not set in stone. You can kind of pick what you want. Teams pick what they want. Players want what they want. Pick what they want. And essentially, they try and find common ground. And it's a series of 1-year deals. If you're to be eligible for arbitration, you have to have 3 years of big league service time, or there are special cases called Super 2s. Super 2s are players who have just under 3 years of service time, and the top 20% of those players get an extra year of arbitration. So instead of making the minimum for the first 6 years of your career, you make the minimum for the first 3 years of your career, and then you have 3 shots at arbitration, after which you are a unrestricted free agent. So arbitration eligible players, they're not free agents. They are still, their rights are still exclusively owned by their team. But this is kind of a lot of players' first chance at a pay raise from the previous year. Teams cannot offer less than 80% of what the player made the previous year. And essentially what typically happens is that player exchanges a number, team exchanges a number. They find somewhere in the middle where both sides are happy, and they agree to a deal. They tender them a contract. If you don't get tendered a contract, you are a free agent immediately. So you can tender somebody a contract, and if they don't accept, they're not a free agent. You go to actual arbitration, which is typically a judge looks at, he looks at the numbers, the offers. He listens to both sides say why they're worth this and why they're not worth this. And then the judge picks a number. He does not get to say split the difference. He has to pick one or the other. And that's what the player gets for a year. They do that 3 times, sometimes 4, if you're Super 2. But they do that 3 times. And after that, you're a free agent. So it's pretty rare that players actually go to arbitration. Typically, it behooves both the team, mostly the team, but the team and the player to just kind of find somewhere in the middle between the 2 numbers and just get a deal done that way. Because if you go to the arbitration process, that can get a little nasty because you're basically telling a player to his face why he's not worth what he thinks he is. And there can be some, long-term hurt feelings and stuff like that. Of course, last year, kind of the most famous case of Corbin Burns going to arbitration. The Brewers took him to arbitration over, what was it, $600,000?
I think it was 750, something like that, somewhere in that range.
Chump change for major league teams. And that's usually what it is. We're talking about sometimes the difference in offers is like $50,000.
Mhm.
But in this case, it was 750, and essentially the Brewers had to go on record and say that we're not willing to pay Corbin Burnes this amount because he cost us the playoffs last year,
Mhm.
which obviously got back to Corbin because his agent told him that, and things went sideways fast. So arbitration, very simply put, is a way to get players who are not yet free agent eligible, is a way to get them pay raises in a kind of incremental step. You make more as an ARB2 than you do as an ARB1, and then ARB3, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, very simply put, it's you still have control over these players. They're just kind of arguing for a raise
Right.
the last 3 years of their contract.
Right. And in some instances, you'll see, especially towards the end of a player's arbitration eligibility, there's not necessarily extensions handed out, but contracts agreed upon where maybe you just settle on a number for the final 2 years of arbitration. Jesse Winker is a great example of this. A couple of years back with the Mariners, they agreed to a contract to just buy out his last couple of years of arbitration. That didn't give the Mariners an extra year or anything like that, but it helped them and Jesse avoid the whole process of arbitration to begin with, just so they don't have to deal with it. So sometimes you'll see that, and you'll see. I think sometimes it is worded as an extension, but it's not actually an extension.
For it to be an extension, you have to buy free agent years.
Yeah.
So if you're ARB1 and you sign a guy to a 4-year contract, that is an extension. If you sign a guy to a 2-year contract, that's not an extension. That is just buying out a year of ARB, and then he still has one more arbitration year after that extension. Right. So yeah, right. It's pretty simple. Like, it's a little complicated, but at the end of the day, like, as long as you tender these guys a contract, they're going to be on your roster next year unless you trade them.
Right. Yeah. So the Mariners have 8 arbitration eligible players this off season. And MLB Trade Rumors, of course, has projections on where they might land this offseason. And usually MLB Trade Rumors is really, really accurate with this stuff. There really hasn't ever been a time where it's been too far off the mark with their projections and what it ends up being and what guys end up making. So we're just going to go through this list and talk about a couple of these guys here. Logan Gilbert is one of those guys. He's projected to make $4.9 million. Obviously, yes, he's going to be tendered. Mike Ford, $1.5 million. Justin Topa, $1.5 million. Sam Haggerty, $800,000. Josh Rojas, $3.5 million. Trent Thornton, $1.4 million. Luis Torrens, $1.3 million. Ty France, $7.2 million. So, Colby, of any of those guys that I listed, any of them that you think should not be tendered a contract?
Luis Torrens should not be. Not at that price. If you really want Torrens back in the org, there's a decent chance you get him for the minimum. So you non-tender him, he goes into free agency, he has a shot to, make more than you're willing to offer, but yeah, he's probably not going to. I think that we've talked a little bit about Ty France as being a guy who you could non-tender. At less than 8, it's kind of hard to see them doing that.
Agreed.
But I do think that I think it's a discussion, but I also think that at that price, it probably just makes more sense to tender him that contract, bring him back and see what happens. Protect yourself still, but I think that makes sense. Thornton, I'm probably not giving 1.1, 1.2?
1.4.
Yeah, I'm not giving Thornton that. I'm not giving Ford that, I don't think either.
Really?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. And here's the deal with ARB is you have to make a decision pretty early on. The arbitration hearings aren't until usually late January or February, but the arbitration deadline is pretty early on in the off season. So you have to make these decisions pretty fast. But yeah, Ford 1.5, like I wouldn't be upset if they did that. But I probably wouldn't. Topa is an absolute yes. Haggerty, sure. I mean, I guess. You have 40-man spot, but yeah, I would say no to Torrens, Thornton, and I'm really on the fence about Ford. But everybody else, I think I'm a yes.
And obviously, you would say no to Logan Gilbert.
I mean, I would honestly, my solution to Gilbert would be to, hey, Logan, you want 4 years and $36 million right now?
Sure.
Just buy out all 4 years of arbitration.
Just so you don't have to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, if he's going to make 4.5 this year, next year he's going to make 8. The year after that, he's going to make, I don't know, 12 to 13, and the year after that, he's probably going to make 20. So you might be able to save a little bit there. But yeah, I think Torrens, Haggerty, Torrens, Thornton, and Ford are probably no's, but none of those are an egregious amount of money. But
right, not to get
we'll
too hung up on this, but really no to Mike Ford after a 123 WRC plus season. I know he's a first base DH
first base
type,
only.
but it's $1.5 million.
I mean,
Like,
yeah, I mean, like if they do
nothing.
it, fine. But like if they non-tender Mike Ford, am I going to get on the show and question
Sure.
John Stanton's commitment to ownership? Probably, but that's not going to be related to Mike Ford.
Right. Sure.
But no, I would get if they didn't. But again, this is a projection. Maybe it's Mike Ford is, hey, Mike, do you want $1.1 million for this upcoming year? Sure. Okay. Yeah. So, but yeah, Topa to me is a no-brainer. Obviously, Logan is a no-brainer. Rojas to me is a no-brainer. I know that Joe Doyle disagrees, but I honestly think that's stupid to suggest that you would non-tender Josh Rojas. Not that right now he's your starting second baseman and he's pretty solid player. So $3 million. If you non-tender Rojas at 3.5, that's cheap. That's being cheap. And then France, like I said, I mean, significantly under $8 million. Yeah, I'm probably going to go ahead and roll with him next year, but also protect myself. So yeah, no big surprises from the Mariners side of things, I don't think.
All right, so we're going to look at some key projections around the league, see if there's any non-tender candidates that could be of interest to Seattle, or maybe some guys where their number is so high that their teams might be more likely to trade them than we initially thought heading into the offseason. We'll talk about all of that in just a moment, but first a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by Ibotta. It's football season, so that means pizza, wings, and maybe even some buffalo chicken dip. Whatever you prefer at your tailgate, go all out and get cash back on every purchase with Ibotta. Ibotta gives you cash back on hundreds of grocery items, from produce to personal care to pantry goods, so you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. Either link your loyalty account or upload your receipt after you shop and get your cash back. It's that easy. The average Ibotta user earns $100 per year. Other apps give you points that don't amount to much. With Ibotta, you get real cash back that you can cash out to your bank account, PayPal, or gift cards. You can earn cash back on hundreds of online brands and retailers too when you start with Ibotta, including Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. Download the Ibotta app now and use promo code MLB to start earning real cash back. Just go to the App Store or the Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app and use promo code MLB. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play Store or App Store and use promo code MLB. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you again for making us your first listen. So, Colby, when we look around the league here now on MLB TR's arbitration projections, what stands out to you the most?
Not as many potential big names getting non-tendered this winter as last winter. I mean, last winter, the big one, of course, Cody Bellinger. Yeah, I don't really see a Bellinger type. I don't see anybody who's like definitely getting non-tendered at their, anybody of like real significance who's getting non-tendered at their projection. So I think, I think more than likely we're going to see most of these guys get traded before they get non-tendered. So I don't think there's going to be any massive shakeups to the current free agent class, which, isn't ideal because it's not a great free agent class, but also, it's a normal group. Like I think last year was kind of an exception. But
sure.
There's some useful players here. There's some useful lottery tickets here, but overall, I don't see too many guys that are like no brainer. That guy's getting non-tendered or that guy has to be traded because of his contract. There's some teams that have a lot of they have a lot of ARB guys, but they don't have a lot of, like the Yankees. I think they have like 16 ARB guys, and I only found one guy that I felt like is most definitely not getting that number. So, I think it's pretty, basic list, pretty common list. There are some guys who could help you. There are some guys who might get non-tendered, but I think most of these guys that I kind of ID'd here are probably getting traded with a few exceptions.
So a couple of guys that we're probably going to talk about quite a bit just in terms of what fans are going to be asking for here. Juan Soto, is projected to make $33 million. Gleyber Torres is projected to make, where is it? $15.3 million. So I'll have to keep that in mind if we're talking about trades for those guys, for sure. So yeah, so who are some guys here that you think could get non-tendered, or their number might make their team more willing to trade them, from the Mariners' perspective?
I got about, I don't know, 15 names here. You just want me to run through all of them?
We can run through all of them. You can highlight a couple, up to you, whatever you want to do.
Well, since we're really good at brevity, I'll just name all of them.
Sure.
Sure. And I'm sure I missed some. So if you don't hear the guy's name on this list that you want to talk about, just let us know. I'm sure we'll address them at some point this offseason. But
yeah.
These are just guys quick skimming the list that I think really stand out here. Jared Walsh of the Angels, due to make $2.7 million. He's not getting that. He hasn't performed the last 2 years. He's been hurt. I think he's also had some. Actually, I'm not sure. I want to double check on that, but yeah, he's probably not getting that. That's a lottery ticket move, though. You're not paying Jared Walsh $2.7 million, but if he's $1 million in a 40-man spot to see what you get in spring training, fine. Seth Brown is a guy that I like, and he's only scheduled to make 2.4. That's definitely something Oakland could swallow and might, but it's also Oakland, so who knows? Adam Simber, Northwest guy, kind of a funky delivery out of the bullpen. He's set to make $3.2 million for the Blue Jays this year. Toronto certainly can afford that, but they have a lot of other pieces they need to take care of. So Simber wasn't incredible this year either. He was actually sent down to the minors for a little bit. So
yeah,
there's a guy, Willie Adames, probably the first name that people would perk up at. 12.4 million is the projection. Brewers, I don't want to say notoriously cheap, but very, very, very mid-market team who has other guys they need to pay. And Adames didn't have a great year. Did not have a great year, so I can see him.
He was still a 3.5 win player, but all of that was defense. He was
most of it
below,
was defense. Yeah, 20 some odd home
average
runs.
hitter.
Yeah, 20 plus home runs. Obviously, the year before he was really good. The reason that a lot of these guys would be, non-tendered or traded is because they're coming off of a down year. So, but yeah, Adames plays short, play third if you need him to, can probably play second. Like there's some stuff there. Mike Yastrzemski of the Giants, set to make 7.3 million. Lefty bat, can play kind of all three outfield spots. Good fit for T-Mobile Park. But again, the Giants can afford anything they want. But just a guy to keep an eye on. That could be a guy that, in theory, like I don't think this would happen, but in theory you could like swap Ty France for Yastrzemski and the salaries are about the same and the players, about the same in terms of value. JD Davis also of the Giants, 6.8 million. That's pretty steep for a guy who was pretty much Ty France last year. Can play some third though. Also play some first. There's some Ty France insurance for you. Josh Naylor is the guy that I really like on this list. Now, he's probably the least likely guy to get traded or non-tender, but $7.2 million is not nothing for Cleveland. And Naylor is a guy who, chases but doesn't strike out. He's a good fit for Seattle. Left-handed pull power for days. Play first base, DH, that type of stuff. Ramon Laureano, you guys know who he is. 4.7 million, fourth, fifth outfield type. Drew Smith, right-handed reliever for the Mets. It's got some interesting fastball data. Joey Lucchesi, $2 million. He's kind of a fifth, sixth swing starter with some pretty good stuff and stuff that I think could play out of the bullpen if you need him to. Kyle Finnegan is, from the Nationals, $5.1 million. Hard-throwing righty. I think that's probably a step too high for the Nats, but the Nats are probably thinking that they can make a run at the wild card next year, so maybe. Anthony Santander is another one, 12.7 million. That's definitely going to be a trade if Santander is not playing for the Orioles, but Orioles are notoriously cheap. That's obvious. So Santander, 1 year of that, probably getting traded. Plus they have the young bats to replace him. Former Mariner Austin Nola is kind of an interesting one. 2.35 million. He's been terrible. The Padres are
he's not getting that.
No, the Padres are more than willing to move on. He's going to be a free agent. Could you get him on a minor league deal? maybe. He likes Seattle. We know that. And we know that the Mariners like having him. So if they think they can fix him, why not? Maybe even give him $1 million in a 40-man spot. Who knows? Trent Grisham, also the Padres. Probably not a guy who's getting on tender. He's projected to make less than $5 million, but really good center fielder. The bat just kind of disappeared on him. So we'll have to wait and see there. Scott Barlow, pitcher for the Padres, reliever for the Padres. Good stuff. $7.1 million. Luis Urias, definitely getting non-tendered. $4.7 million for a utility guy, and who might not be better than Dylan Moore. We'll see. Threw him on the list anyways. Kyle Farmer, the Twins, kind of a platoon infielder, can play first, can play second, can play third, can play short. Like, he's pretty much Dylan Moore. But a little bit higher floor than Dylan Moore. So that's an interesting guy. Lou Trevino, former A's reliever. He missed all of this year. I'm not sure if the health is there, but he's definitely not getting $4.1 million from the Yankees this year. And that's kind of one of those reclamation projects you can take a shot on. And I saved him for last because I know people would be interested in this one. Paul Sewald. Yes, that Paul Sewald. $7.3 million for the Arizona Diamondbacks. Not a guy who's most definitely getting non-tendered, but I wouldn't say he's a guarantee to get non-tendered either. And if the Mariners have a shot to reacquire Paul Sewald for, less than what we think they could, then they'd be fools not to.
Yeah, agreed. Would love to have Paul Sewald back.
Yep.
So, hoping that the Diamondbacks will non-tender him on that front, so we can bring him home, or just trade for him. That'd be cool too.
I'll trade Don Canzone for him. One of those guys is a good major leaguer.
I, for one, would pay Paul Sewald $7.3 million, but that's just
absolutely.
So I love Paul Sewald. All right, so Jon Morosi hopped on 710 Seattle Sports this morning and said the Mariners should target a superstar, but not Shohei Ohtani, not Juan Soto. I'll tell you who that is coming up here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. But first, a reminder, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Celebrate the start of the NFL season with great offers from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 back in bonus bets guaranteed. Plus, all customers who bet $5 will get $100 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Now is the best time to join FanDuel. The app is easy to use, and you can be in on everything from spreads to player props and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's LOCKEDON. Kick off the NFL season with an offer you won't want to miss. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you again for making us your first listen. So Jon Morosi of MLB Network hopped on with, I believe, Wyman and Bob to talk some Mariners and made a very interesting statement. Now, the thing about Jon Morosi is he is fairly plugged into what the Mariners are doing. And last offseason, he did kind of hint at a Teoscar Hernandez deal about 3 or 4 days before it actually happened. So that's why we're bringing this up ultimately, because sometimes when Morosi has something to say about the Mariners, you have to pay attention. So he talked about the Mariners potentially acquiring a superstar, but it's not Ohtani. It's not Juan Soto. He said, quote, "My first choice, even ahead of Ohtani, is if you could find a way to talk with the Guardians about Jose Ramirez." Continue to say, with them, manager Terry Francona is leaving. I realize Ramirez is on a long-term deal with a full no trade clause, all those things, but maybe just file that one away. Because if I was a Mariners fan and could wave the magic wand, I would honestly say, give me a trade for J-Ram as opposed to waiting for the Ohtani possibility, which is probably like 15%. Take the sure thing if you can do it. You've got the pitching, you've got a lot of pieces. Make the phone call to Cleveland, in my opinion. So, Colby, Jose Ramirez is arguably the most underrated star in today's game and has been for quite some time. He is a legitimate perennial MVP candidate. This year, 282, 356, 475. That's a 123 WRC plus, 5-1 player. He walked literally as many times as he struck out this year. 73 walks, 73 strikeouts. Jose Ramirez is elite and obviously has a great right hook on him too. Like Morosi mentioned, he did just sign a long-term deal that has him locked up through his age 36 season. That's through 2028. It is with a full no trade clause. But the Guardians are weird. They operate very, very weird. And they've displayed signs of cheapness, even though they have given out deals, long-term deals, like the one to Ramirez, but also the one to Ramirez is nowhere near what Jose Ramirez should probably be making on the market right now. I think at most on a yearly, like on a year basis, like an AAV basis, I think the most he's making is like $26 million.
Yeah, it's the last year of his deal.
Yeah.
He's 5 years, 105 remaining. Jose Ramirez, when he signed that contract, probably left $150 million plus on the table.
Yep.
Not his smartest decision, but whatever. His decision to make nonetheless. Yeah, let's also remember that Morosi's the same guy who said Logan Gilbert for Lars Nootbaar made a lot of sense for both teams. So
there's also that.
Yeah. Now,
so there's a lot of give and take here with Jon Morosi.
We do know that, hey, you know what? We have a month before any moves can be made. So yeah, we're going to talk about this. As ridiculous as it is. So yeah, I don't think the Guardians are trading Jose Ramirez. I don't know if it would even make that much sense for the Mariners to acquire him. Not because you don't want Jose Ramirez, of course you do. But what does that cost? Because I have a hard time putting together a Jose Ramirez trade package that doesn't include Kirby or Gilbert, plus probably Kelnick, plus probably Harry Ford or Colt Emerson, plus probably
Ty Pete, Johnny Farmello, et cetera,
you know, Gabby Gonzalez. Like pick like 3 top prospects or 2 top prospects and Kelnick and Gilbert, and you probably get the Guardians' attention. But even then, they're like, okay, now what else? So, yeah, I don't see this as the possibility, a real one. I'd love it to be. And if you told me I could get Jose Ramirez for just 4 prospects, I would tell Cleveland to pick any 4 prospects they want. I don't care at that point. But that's not how this works. So I also don't think the idea that like, oh, they have pitching. Yep. Cleveland is really good at developing their own pitching. So it's not that they wouldn't value Logan Gilbert. Of course they would, but they can kind of make their own Logan Gilbert. They kind of do it every year. So wouldn't they prioritize bats?
Well, also, what is their plan if they're trading Jose Ramirez?
Right. I mean, like they kind of overachieved last year. This year, I would say they underachieved a little bit, but that's a organization that's got some good pitching. They've got, you know, good players, Naylor and obviously Ramirez and Kwan, like they Jimenez, like they've got good players. Is that the right one? Yeah, it is. They've got good players. They got, you know, an offense that is functional. They've got, you know, a pretty good farm system. They've got young pitching. Like that's why part of it is like, if you're rebuilding, you're trading Bieber, you're trading Ramirez, you're probably trading Kwan. They're not going to rebuild. They're going to kind of reset. Ramirez is locked in for an incredible bargain for the next 5 years. It's not like Shane Bieber, who is R3, I think, this year. And so they're probably open to trading him. Although, did he end up having Tommy John? I can't remember. But yeah, I don't see why Cleveland would do it. And again, to make Cleveland consider it, if I have to give up Logan Gilbert, I'm not saying no, but that's also not like a gimme. Like you're not just like, yep, all day with that. So, because now you have to go out and you have to get the pitcher to replace Gilbert. So, you know, I'd love for Morosi to not be, you know, talking out of his, you know what, but, and again, like you said, he did, you know, he was at least briefly in, you know, the Teoscar stuff, but that was kind of common sense. I think we all looked at that and we're like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And the Cardinals stuff, we do know the Mariners talked about, you know, about some of the young hitters the Cardinals have. And we do know the Cardinals really like Logan Gilbert. So, you know, you could draw some connections there that Morosi knows something, but this is pure speculation. And I don't even think it makes sense because I don't think it makes a ton of sense for Cleveland to do this. I don't think it really makes a ton of sense for Seattle to do this again, unless you can tell me that like, oh yeah, they want Harry Ford and Colt Emerson and Ty Pete and Jared Kelnick, then it's like, oh, well, yeah, okay, sure. But that's not what it's going to take. It's going to take Kirby. It's going to take Gilbert plus.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's the best decision the Mariners can make. I don't know if that's the best they can do with, Gilbert, again, just making this up, total speculation. Gilbert, Ford, Emerson, Pete. Like, is J-Ram the best they could do? Maybe. But also, is that worth it then?
Yeah. Let me preface this by saying that this is very, very, very low. But I would put the chances of Shohei Ohtani signing with the Mariners higher than the Mariners trading for Jose Ramirez, contrary to Jon Morosi's belief.
Well, Morosi said they have a 15% chance at Ohtani. Like, no.
Yeah.
I appreciate the optimism, John, but no.
I don't see a clear path here for the Mariners to make a trade for Jose Ramirez for all the reasons that you just laid out.
Right. I do think they should go to Cleveland and ask about a bat. I just happen to think that bat probably should be Josh Naylor. A guy who has 2 years left and also doesn't strike out and also has power. And, he's first base DH only, but he stole 10 bags last year. Go figure, right? So yeah, I think Cleveland and Seattle could make some sense on a few trades, pending health, could Seattle kind of throw their weight around and go get Shane Bieber and just build this like super rotation? Maybe. Josh Naylor's a guy. Could they maybe, again, I'm not saying, could they do like Woo for like Stephen Kwan or something like that? Maybe, I don't know. But I do think Cleveland, has some pieces that make sense for Seattle. I think in a vacuum, you're definitely interested in Jose Ramirez, but just realistically looking at what it probably costs to acquire a guy like that, to, in essence, kind of force Cleveland to be interested in trading him. I just don't think that it's going to, I just don't think it's going to work. I don't think that that's a very realistic possibility. And I would say it's probably about on par with signing Ohtani in terms of realism, which I think I've put at like 0.5%. So
yeah,
so
I'd also put a Juan Soto trade as a higher likelihood of happening than a Jose Ramirez trade. And again, that's very, very low. We're talking like tenths of a tenth of a tenth of a tenth of a percent here.
Yeah, maybe. That one comes down to cost. And, obviously Jerry always is going to value club control even when he maybe shouldn't. But yeah, like, again, like just to be clear, if you're telling me I could get Ramirez with Miller or Woo as the headliner,
oh yeah,
then yeah, absolutely.
I just don't see that.
No, I don't either.
Yeah.
Because I think again, you're going to have to force Cleveland to be like, oh yeah, no, we actually will move Ramirez. And I think in order to force them into that decision, we're talking about, you got to offer them Cal, Logan, Kirby, JP. Like, I think you're just offering, I just think you're kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul at that point, but never say never, I guess.
Yeah.
But
I'm not going to completely shut any of this stuff down because you never know. But from my perspective, I can't envision a way that the Mariners get any of these guys, really. Soto, Ramirez, Ohtani, etc. I have a very hard time convincing myself that that's a real possibility. But again, for your guys' sake, we're going to be fair about it. We're going to talk about it. We're going to cover all these things. We're going to leave ourselves open to the possibility. Just right now, I can't see it.
Sometimes Robinson Cano signs with the Mariners. It can happen. I would say this, and then we'll wrap because I know we got to go. If we get firm reports from multiple sources that Cleveland is interested, they are open to trading Jose Ramirez, this conversation goes, a completely different way, because right now I am operating under the assumption that like Cleveland isn't interested in trading Jose Ramirez, and your offer kind of has to be in that like blow us away and we'll think about it mold.
Yeah, like,
but
you
if
have
they're
to
actually
force their
shopping,
hand.
yeah, if they're actually shopping Ramirez and they're listening on offers, yes, the answer is yes. Again, not Gilbert, not Kirby,
100%.
not any young core, but like any prospect package, yes, you're interested. So, things are subject to change, but until we hear that Cleveland is shopping Ramirez or they're open to the idea, and we hear it from not just like, oh, well, maybe, like firm, like passing is like, hey, Cleveland is shopping Jose Ramirez.
Or Cleveland beat reporters are talking about it.
Right. Like, Watch out for a Jose Ramirez trade. Cleveland's very interested in it, blah, blah, blah. Like once we start seeing stuff like that, the conversation changes completely because honestly, trading for Ramirez makes more sense to me than giving Ohtani $600 million. So, but until that day, this is just kind of, it's just kind of October 6th and there's no baseball on today. So, you know, the Mariners didn't make the playoffs, so we can't talk about that. So we'll just throw this out there.
Sure. All right. That's going to do it for our show. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. For Colby Patnode, I'm Trident Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Dane Gonzalez. It's DANEGNZLZ. Colby at CPAT11. That's CPAT11. You can also find all that stuff in the description of this episode. Thank you again for making us your first listen. Have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we'll see you next time. Peace.